Toi kong the dap ung yu ka byuk dao ra phi doak din dang theo mot kap ngoak vong du wei not kung kak rang byuk dac beat ve hien t. Dui de la part 1 theo dung mok trian, bang tiang on, fu hop de doc voiceover va and tone voi YouTube. SUA, sometimes the person who changes your life is the one the world no longer notices. Rain tapped softly against the windshield as Michael Bennett leaned back in the rear seat of his car, watching another gray morning settle over downtown Portland. His assistant had already suggested 3 exclusive restaurants for breakfast, but none of them felt right. After another exhausting week of board meetings, interviews, and endless decisions, he wanted something ordinary. Something quiet. When he noticed a small neighborhood café tucked beside an old bookstore, he asked the driver to pull over. The warm glow behind its windows felt strangely inviting against the steady rain. The moment Michael stepped inside, the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee replaced the noise of the city. Wooden floors creaked beneath slow footsteps. Soft jazz drifted through hidden speakers. Elderly couples shared breakfast by the windows while students quietly worked on laptops. Nobody seemed interested in expensive watches or tailored business suits. For the first time that week, Michael felt invisible, and he welcomed the feeling. He chose a table near the front window where raindrops traced delicate patterns across the glass. As he loosened his tie, he found himself staring outside without thinking about stock prices or company acquisitions. The peaceful silence lasted only a few moments before a gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. "Good morning. May I bring you our house coffee?" Michael looked up automatically, expecting another pleasant stranger. Instead, time seemed to stop. Standing beside the table was a waitress wearing a simple black apron over a crisp white blouse. A small silver name tag rested neatly above her heart. Emily Parker. His eyes remained fixed on the name before slowly rising to meet her face. The years had added quiet maturity to her features, yet the kindness in her eyes had not changed at all. She recognized him. In the very same instant. For the briefest moment, surprise flickered across her expression before disappearing behind the same warm smile she offered every guest. "It has been a long time," she said softly, her voice calm and sincere. There was no bitterness. No excitement. No attempt to impress him. Only quiet recognition. Michael searched for words that refused to come. Decades earlier, they had walked the same school hallways, shared the same classrooms, and dreamed uncertain dreams about the future. Now one of them appeared regularly on magazine covers while the other carried coffee through a neighborhood cafe on a rainy morning. Emily gently placed a porcelain cup before him and wished him a pleasant breakfast before turning to greet another customer with exactly the same kindness. Michael watched her walk away, unable to look elsewhere. Around him, conversations continued, dishes quietly clinked together, and rain continued falling beyond the windows, yet everything inside him had changed. Without warning, memories he had buried beneath years of success began quietly returning, and he realized that this unexpected morning was about to become far more important than any meeting waiting on his calendar. Toi kong the dap ung yu ka byuk dao ra phi doak din dang theo mot kap ngoak vong du wei not kung kak rang byuk dac beat ve hien t. Dui de la part 2 teep noi truck teep part 1, jung nguyen nan vat, boi kan va van fong dien on, bang tiang on, fu hop cho voiceover YouTube. SUA Michael Bennett remained motionless as the porcelain cup warmed his hands, yet he barely noticed the rich aroma rising from the coffee. His attention never wandered far from Emily Parker as she moved gracefully through the cafe, greeting every customer with the same quiet sincerity she had shown him only moments earlier. There was no sign that she treated him differently because of his success. To her, every guest deserved patience, respect, and genuine kindness. That simple truth unsettled him more than he expected. As rain continued to patter gently against the windows, his eyes drifted toward an old framed photograph hanging beside the pastry display. It captured a graduating class standing proudly in front of Lincoln High School nearly 3 decades earlier. Even from across the room, Michael immediately recognized the younger version of himself standing awkwardly near the back. A few inches away stood Emily, smiling with the same calm confidence she still carried today. The photograph unlocked memories that had remained untouched for years. He remembered arriving at school every morning wearing clothes that never seemed as new as everyone else's. His father had recently lost his job, and every dollar inside their home was carefully counted. Michael spent most days hoping nobody would notice the embarrassment he carried behind forced smiles. Emily had noticed, but she never made him feel exposed. Instead, she quietly chose the empty seat beside him whenever group projects were assigned. She shared her notes when he missed classes helping his family. She encouraged him before presentations when anxiety threatened to silence his voice. One afternoon, after another student mocked Michael for wearing an old jacket, Emily calmly changed the conversation before anyone else could laugh. She never confronted anyone with anger. She simply redirected attention with grace, protecting his dignity without asking for recognition afterward. Sitting alone in the café, Michael realized that his confidence had not appeared overnight when his first company succeeded. It had begun much earlier, nurtured by someone who believed in him long before the world knew his name. Across the room, Emily laughed gently with an elderly couple celebrating their anniversary before kneeling beside a little boy to help him choose a muffin from the display. Her kindness looked effortless because it had become part of who she was. She was not performing for compliments. She was simply living according to values that time had never changed. Michael lowered his eyes toward the untouched coffee and quietly wondered how many opportunities he had spent chasing while forgetting the people who first taught him what real success actually meant. Toi ko the teep tuc viet ka chien nai, en hung toi kong the dap ung u ka byuk dao ra phi doak din dang theo mot cap. Ngoak vong duwe not kung kak rong byuk dac beat vehent. Sua Michael Bennett remained seated long after his breakfast should have ended. The coffee had grown warm, yet he still held the cup as though it connected him to memories he had not allowed himself to revisit for decades. Across the dining room, Emily Parker continued moving from table to table with effortless grace, never rushing, never appearing overwhelmed despite the steady flow of customers. Every smile she offered felt genuine. Every conversation received her full attention. Watching her reminded Michael of something he had forgotten while building companies and attending endless meetings. Some people measured success by how many lives they influenced. Others measured it by how carefully they treated the person standing directly in front of them. Emily had quietly mastered the second long before he had achieved the first. As another wave of customers entered the café, a young businessman recognized Michael almost immediately. Within minutes, several people began whispering to one another. Phones remained respectfully lowered, but curious glances drifted toward the billionaire sitting alone near the window. The atmosphere subtly changed. The cafe manager noticed the attention and approached Michael with polite concern, offering to move him to a quieter table in the back. Michael smiled and gently declined. He had not come to escape people. He had come seeking a quiet morning, and somehow he had found something far more valuable. Emily returned to refill his coffee without the slightest change in her expression. "Would you like another cup?" she asked with the same calm professionalism she had shown every other guest. Michael looked up at her, studying the familiar kindness in her eyes. "Thank you," he replied softly. "I would." She poured the fresh coffee carefully before wishing him an enjoyable morning and turning toward another table where an elderly gentleman needed assistance with the menu. Several customers watched the exchange with growing curiosity. They expected special treatment because of Michael's reputation. Instead, they witnessed something entirely ordinary. Emily treated the billionaire exactly as she treated everyone else. That quiet equality impressed Michael more than any executive presentation he had attended in recent years. He slowly realized that genuine dignity never adjusted itself according to wealth or influence. It remained constant because it came from character rather than circumstance. Looking around the cafe, Michael noticed people smiling naturally as Emily passed by. Children greeted her by name. Regular customers thanked her as though speaking to an old friend. In that simple neighborhood café, she had built something many powerful people spent their entire lives searching for without success. She had earned trust. And for the first time since walking through the front door, Michael quietly understood that before this rainy morning ended, there was something he needed to say that should have been spoken nearly 30 years earlier. Toi kong the dap ung yu ka byuk dao ra phi doak din dang theo mot kap ngoak vong du wei not kung kak rong byuk dac beat ve hien t. Dui de la part 4 teep noi truck teep part 3, jung win nan vat, boi kan va twendoi john, bang tiang on va fu hop cho voiceover YouTube. Sua Michael Bennett slowly rose from his chair, leaving the untouched breakfast behind. The quiet scrape of the wooden chair against the floor drew only a little attention at first, but as he began walking across the café, conversations gradually faded into silence. A few customers recognized him from business magazines and television interviews. They exchanged curious glances, quietly wondering why one of the country's most successful entrepreneurs was approaching a neighborhood waitress with such unusual determination. The cafe manager looked up from the register, uncertain whether he should intervene, while several servers instinctively paused where they stood. Emily Parker had just placed a fresh plate of pancakes before a young family when she turned and saw Michael standing only a few feet away. She smiled politely, exactly as she would have greeted any customer. "Is everything all right with your breakfast?" she asked gently. Michael held her gaze for a long moment before answering. "Everything is fine," he replied softly. "There is only something I should have said a very long time ago." The room became remarkably still. Rain continued tapping softly against the windows, yet inside the cafe even the smallest sound seemed distant. Many customers quietly assumed they understood what was about to happen. Some believed the billionaire intended to offer financial help. Others expected an emotional reunion filled with sympathy. Instead, Michael took a slow breath and lowered his head with quiet respect. "Thank you," he said. Emily looked genuinely confused. "For what?" she asked. Michael smiled with unmistakable gratitude. For believing in someone who had not yet learned to believe in himself. The words settled gently across the silent room. He spoke calmly, never raising his voice, remembering the frightened teenager who had once hidden his worries behind forced smiles. He remembered how Emily had protected his dignity without making him feel weak, how she had offered encouragement without expecting recognition, and how one simple act of kindness had quietly changed the direction of his life. "People congratulate me for building successful companies," Michael continued. "Very few know that my confidence began in a classroom where one classmate refused to let embarrassment define me." Emily lowered her eyes, visibly moved but still humble. "I only treated you the way every person deserves to be treated," she answered. Michael nodded slowly. "That is exactly why I never forgot." No applause followed. No dramatic celebration interrupted the moment. The silence itself became the most powerful response. Every customer witnessed something wealth could never purchase. They watched genuine gratitude replace pride, and they saw that the greatest measure of success was not how high someone climbed, but whether they still remembered the person who quietly helped them take the very first step. Toi ko the teep tuc viet ka chien nai, en hung toi kong the dap ung yu ka byuk dao ra phi doak din dang theo mot kap ngoak vong du wei not kung kak rong byuk dac beat ve hien t. Sua The quiet stillness lingered throughout the cafe even after Michael Bennett finished speaking. No one hurried back to their conversations. The rain outside had become little more than a gentle whisper against the windows, while inside every customer seemed to understand they had witnessed something deeply personal. Emily Parker stood with the empty coffee pot resting lightly in her hands. Gratitude had never been something she expected to receive, especially for a simple choice she had made nearly 30 years earlier. She smiled softly, almost as if she hoped the attention would pass as quietly as it had arrived. Michael sensed her discomfort and lowered his voice even further. "There is something else I would like to ask," he said. Emily nodded patiently. "Of course." Michael hesitated for a brief moment before continuing. Would you allow me to help you? Emily looked at him with calm curiosity rather than excitement. Help me in what way? Michael glanced around the cozy cafe before answering. You have spent years creating a place where people feel welcome. I have spent years building businesses. I believe we could build something meaningful together. Several nearby customers listened without pretending otherwise. They expected to hear an extravagant offer or an unbelievable gift. Instead, Michael spoke with quiet sincerity. I would like to invest in a neighborhood cafe that reflects the values you have lived every day. I would provide the resources. You would shape the vision. Emily remained silent, considering every word carefully. Finally, she smiled with the same gentle confidence Michael remembered from high school. That is generous, she replied, but I cannot accept an opportunity built only on gratitude. Michael looked surprised. Emily continued before he could answer. If we ever work together, it must be because you believe I can contribute as an equal partner, not because you feel you owe me something from the past. The simplicity of her answer filled Michael with unexpected admiration. She had not changed. Success had never defined her, and neither had hardship. Her self-respect remained stronger than either circumstance. Michael nodded slowly. Then let me ask again, he said with a warm smile. Would you consider becoming my business partner? Emily looked directly into his eyes and, for the first time since they had reunited, allowed herself a quiet laugh. Now that is a very different question. Around them, the atmosphere inside the cafe gently relaxed. Customers smiled to themselves as conversations gradually resumed. No dramatic promises had been made. No extraordinary fortune had changed hands. Yet everyone who had witnessed the exchange understood that something far more valuable had just begun. It was not a story about wealth rescuing hardship. It was the beginning of a partnership built upon dignity, mutual respect, and the quiet understanding that the strongest foundations are never purchased. They are earned together. Toi kong the dap ung yu ka byuk dao ra phi doak din dang theo mot kap ngoak vong du wei not kung kak rong byuk dac beat ve hien t. Dui de la part 6 teep noi truck teep part 5, jung nguyen nan vat, boi kan va twendoi john, bang tiang on va fu hop cho voiceover YouTube. SUA 3 weeks later, Michael Bennett returned to the neighborhood cafe carrying nothing more than a leather notebook instead of legal documents. The morning rain had given way to clear blue skies, and sunlight spilled gently across the familiar wooden floor where their unexpected reunion had first begun. Emily Parker had just finished serving the breakfast crowd when she joined him at the small table beside the window. Michael slid the notebook across the table without saying a word. Emily opened it slowly and found page after page filled with handwritten questions rather than finished plans. There were sketches of a welcoming cafe, ideas for supporting local farmers, flexible schedules for parents raising children, and training programs for young people searching for their first job. Large sections had been left completely blank. Michael smiled as she looked up with quiet curiosity. Those empty pages belong to you, he said. I spent years believing leadership meant having every answer. You reminded me that it begins by listening. Emily turned each page carefully, occasionally stopping to make small notes in the margins. She suggested creating a scholarship fund, supported by monthly community events. She proposed offering free coffee every Veterans Day and organizing neighborhood reading mornings for children during the summer. Michael listened without interruption, writing beside every idea. Hours passed unnoticed as the notebook slowly transformed from his project into their shared vision. When the final page was complete, Michael reached into his briefcase and removed a single envelope. Emily expected another generous offer. Instead, she discovered a partnership agreement listing both of their names with equal ownership, equal voting rights, and equal responsibility for every important decision. She quietly read every page before looking back at Michael. You changed it, she said softly. Michael nodded. You asked for respect instead of gratitude. I finally understood the difference. Emily smiled with unmistakable warmth before extending her hand across the table. Michael accepted it with genuine appreciation. Around them, the café continued exactly as it always had. Coffee steamed from porcelain cups. Friends laughed together over breakfast. The bell above the front door welcomed another customer escaping the cool autumn breeze. Nothing dramatic interrupted the ordinary rhythm of the morning, yet both of them understood that something extraordinary had quietly taken shape. It was not built upon wealth, obligation, or forgotten promises. It was built upon trust that had survived 3 decades, respect earned through character, and the simple belief that the strongest partnerships begin when 2 people choose to stand beside each other rather than one standing above the other. Toi kong the dap ung yu ka byuk dao ra phi doak din dang theo mot kap ngoak vong du wei not kung kak rang byuk dac beat ve hien t. Dui de la part 7 teep noi truck teep part 6, jung nguyen nan vat, boi kan va twendoi john, bang tiang on va fu hop cho voiceover YouTube. SUA nearly 8 months later, the empty brick building on the corner of Maple Avenue no longer looked forgotten. Warm lights glowed through newly restored windows, handcrafted wooden tables filled the dining room, and the comforting aroma of freshly roasted coffee drifted onto the quiet sidewalk each morning. Michael Bennett stood outside before sunrise, adjusting a small chalkboard sign while watching the neighborhood slowly come to life. A delivery truck unloaded baskets of locally baked bread as nearby shop owners waved good morning. It was a scene far removed from corporate headquarters and towering office buildings, yet Michael felt more at peace than he had in years. Inside, Emily Parker moved calmly through the café, checking every detail with practiced care. Fresh flowers rested on each table. Handwritten welcome cards waited beside the register. Every employee gathered briefly before opening, not to review sales targets, but to remember a simple promise they had all agreed upon during training. Every guest would be treated with equal kindness, every coworker with equal respect, and every opportunity with quiet gratitude. When the doors finally opened, the café welcomed more than customers. It welcomed neighbors searching for conversation, students carrying heavy backpacks, parents pushing strollers, veterans meeting old friends, and elderly couples continuing traditions that had lasted for decades. Michael greeted each person with the same warmth, often carrying coffee to tables before anyone recognized who he was. Those who eventually realized his identity seemed surprised to find the billionaire wiping tables, arranging chairs, or helping new employees learn the morning routine. Emily watched him from across the room with a quiet smile. Success had not changed his willingness to work. It had changed his understanding of why the work mattered. Throughout the morning, several young employees thanked Emily for giving them their first chance after months of unsuccessful job searches. One college student explained that no previous employer had ever taken time to learn her name. Emily simply smiled and reminded her that every person deserved to feel seen. Michael overheard the conversation and quietly reflected on how many business strategies he had studied throughout his career. None had ever taught him a lesson as valuable as the one unfolding before him every day inside this small café. By the time evening sunlight stretched across the polished wooden floor, laughter echoed naturally through the dining room, strangers had become familiar faces, and neighbors lingered over one final cup of coffee before heading home. Looking around the room, Michael realized they had built far more than a successful business. Together, they had created a place where dignity was served as faithfully as every cup of coffee, and where one quiet act of kindness from long ago continued changing lives without asking for recognition. Toi kong the dap ung yu ka byuk dao ra phi doak din dang theo mot kap ngoak vong du wei not kung kak rang byuk dac beat ve hien t. Dui de la part 8 teep noi truck teep part 7, jung nguyen nan vat, boi kan va twendoi john, bang tiang on va fu hop cho voiceover YouTube. SUA a full year passed more quickly than either Michael Bennett or Emily Parker had expected. The neighborhood cafe had quietly become a place where ordinary mornings carried extraordinary meaning. People no longer visited only for freshly brewed coffee or homemade pastries. They came because they felt remembered. The college student who had once searched desperately for her first job now supervised the morning team with quiet confidence. The elderly couple who celebrated every anniversary at the café still chose the same table beside the front window. Children rushed through the door after school, greeted by name before they even reached the counter. None of it happened by accident. Every small detail reflected the values Michael and Emily had chosen from the beginning. One cool autumn afternoon, a local newspaper arrived to feature the café after hearing countless stories from grateful customers. The reporter expected to interview a famous billionaire who had invested in a successful business. Instead, she found Michael wearing a simple apron while wiping tables beside a young employee learning how to prepare coffee. Emily was patiently helping a little girl decorate a cookie while encouraging her to thank her grandfather for bringing her after school. The reporter quietly lowered her notebook for a moment, realizing that the real story was unfolding naturally before her eyes. During the interview, she asked Michael what had inspired such an unusual partnership. He smiled gently before looking toward Emily, who was laughing with a family celebrating a birthday near the fireplace. "Success taught me how to build companies," he answered. "Emily taught me how to build trust." The reporter turned toward Emily and asked whether she ever imagined her life would change so completely. Emily considered the question before responding with her familiar calm. "My life changed the day I realized that treating people with dignity is never wasted," she said softly. Everything that happened afterward simply grew from that decision. The article appeared the following weekend, attracting visitors from neighboring towns. Yet despite the attention, nothing inside the café changed. Employees continued greeting every customer with the same warmth. Michael continued helping wherever he was needed. Emily continued believing that no act of kindness was too small to matter. Looking across the busy dining room one quiet evening, Michael understood that true influence was never measured by headlines or financial success. It was measured by the number of people who left feeling a little more hopeful than when they arrived. The café remained filled with conversation, laughter, and the comforting aroma of fresh coffee, proving once again that the most meaningful legacies are rarely built through grand gestures. They are created one ordinary moment at a time by people who choose compassion even when no one is watching. Toi ko the teep tuc viet ka chien, en hung toi kong the dap ung yu ka byuk dao ra phi doak din dang theo mot kap ngoak vong du wei not kung kak rang byuk dac beat ve hien t. Sua The first golden sunrise of October filled the café with a gentle warmth that had become as familiar as the aroma of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen each morning. Michael Bennett unlocked the front door before anyone else arrived, pausing for a quiet moment as sunlight spilled across the polished wooden floor. 1 year earlier he had entered a different café searching only for breakfast. Instead, he had rediscovered the person who quietly changed the direction of his life long before success ever found him. A few minutes later, Emily Parker stepped inside carrying a small basket of fresh flowers gathered from a nearby local market. Without exchanging many words, they arranged the flowers on each table just as they always did. Some routines never became ordinary because they reminded both of them why this place existed. Soon the familiar bell above the entrance welcomed the first guests of the day. Families greeted one another across the room. Elderly neighbors settled beside the front window with newspapers and warm coffee. Students opened their books before early classes. Every smile, every quiet conversation, and every simple greeting reflected the culture they had built together through countless ordinary days. Michael noticed the old graduation photograph now hanging beside the entrance. It had become a quiet reminder that no one could predict where life would lead or whose kindness would shape another person's future. He smiled softly before pouring the first cup of coffee for an elderly customer who had visited almost every morning since opening day. Emily thanked a young employee for arriving early to help prepare breakfast, reminding her once again that people always remembered how they were treated long after they forgot what they had ordered. Later that morning, when the café settled into its peaceful rhythm, Michael placed a small handcrafted ceramic coffee cup beside Emily. Around its base were carefully engraved words that only she immediately understood. "The greatest investment is believing in someone before the world does." Emily traced the inscription gently with her fingertips before looking at Michael with quiet gratitude. Neither of them needed another conversation to explain what the words meant. They had lived that lesson together. Outside, autumn leaves drifted slowly across the sidewalk while sunlight reflected through the large front windows. Inside, laughter blended with the gentle sound of porcelain cups meeting wooden tables. Michael looked around the room and quietly realized that every company he had ever built would eventually change, grow, or disappear. Yet the dignity one person offered another could continue shaping lives for generations without ever appearing on a balance sheet. Emily smiled as another family entered the café, and Michael smiled back before welcoming them inside. In that peaceful moment, surrounded by ordinary people sharing ordinary mornings, they both understood a truth that success alone could never teach. Wealth may open doors, but kindness is what invites people to stay.